Hi, welcome to the Kitchen Shrink, where real talk meets real life. We're Kat and Cal, two therapists helping you make sense of relationships, emotions, and everything in between. Pull up a chair. Let's sort through it together.
Hey, everybody. We are really excited about today's topic. It has something to do with relationships. It says, hey, Kat and Cal, my wife and I have been married for 11 years, and honestly, we have a really good marriage most of the time. We enjoy being together, we're raising our family, and we genuinely love each other. But when conflict happens, it escalates fast. When my wife tells me she's hurt, my first instinct is to defend myself because I don't want her to think I'm a bad husband. Sometimes I feel like all she does is attack me. I always get defensive and she ends up shutting down, and it usually makes the fight worse. She said she feels like I don't care about her. When she won't talk to me, I get really stressed out and have a hard time giving her space because I'm worried we won't talk for hours or maybe even days. Eventually, one of us gives in, or we just move on without ever really resolving the fight. I feel so desperate and alone during these times. It feels impossible to come back to normal. Is this just normal marriage stuff, or are we setting ourselves up for bigger problems down the road? How do we stop getting stuck in this cycle? Well, hey, I am really glad you guys are showing up for today. This is going to be a good topic, and we're probably going to go kind of deep at some points, but yeah, relationships.
The one thing I will say is they've obviously been married long enough to have a family and all the things. And so it is, when they're sitting there kind of questioning like, oh, is this going to be a bigger problem down the road?
Mm-hmm.
I just want to say congratulations on being able to survive this pattern up until this point. And what an awesome opportunity to be able to be here to sort of start to look at how can we reconstruct this pattern so that it's creating a different outcome. Because look at you, you're still here, you're still existing, you're still successful. We're just going to hopefully give you some tools that just make this feel lighter and more manageable going forward. Yeah,
and hopeful. And I love that, Kat, that you said congratulations on surviving this pattern so far.
Yeah.
Really. And it's great that you're having some insight, and now's the time. So, and I love at the end, he says, how do we stop getting stuck in this cycle? So when I work with couples, I look at their cycle, and you out there listening, and kind of as we finish up today, I want you to look back and reflect on what happens every time you get into conflict, because I think it's, what do they say? 90% is the content. I flipped that, didn't I?
10%. Hear the rest.
Yeah. You got to hear the rest. For 10% of conflict is the content. It's what you're arguing about.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and then the 90% is your body language, your tone, and so
your history. Yeah, you bring into it.
That's exactly right. We're going to be talking about how you're showing up for conflict, and I think unless you have done the hard work and the healing, and you've got the insight that my trauma keeps showing up in these conflicts, you're going to be like, a couple of 7 or 8-year-old kids bringing your trauma responses, your protective responses into those conflicts.
Yeah. And I think these are really great conversations to have. And when we're talking about changing a cycle, I would advise, not that I'm your therapist, not that we are your therapist,
Mm-hmm.
but the suggestion would be perhaps to have conversations around changing patterns outside of conflict, as opposed to getting some ideas from this podcast and then going into a conflict and being like, I'm ready now. By having the conversation ahead of time, you can talk about how would we restructure this differently based off some of the suggestions you might have heard that you think would be helpful.
No, I like that. That's a great idea. I think, people come in and say, we need help with communication. Well, you're communicating. It's just not usually really healthy or effective. They don't always have a communication problem. They have a protection problem.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of what you're alluding to, right? Like when I show up in an argument, I love it. This guy actually kind of breaks down some of the issues and kind of gives us to us on a silver platter, right? Like he already kind of gives us an idea of what they do within that conflict cycle. He said he feels attacked. And she said she feels like he doesn't care about her. And then there's some fear in there too. He says, I'm worried that we won't talk for hours or maybe even days.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of unpacks a little bit of like some attachment longings, attachment wounds that we kind of bring right along with us.
Mm-hmm. And attachment wounds are especially triggered when we personalize somebody bringing their stuff to us.
Right.
If there's stuff going on inside of us and we're saying, I don't feel like you care about me, or I feel like I need to defend myself, like you don't understand me, that is creating that 90% pattern of the history that's kind of being added, as opposed to being able to understand that our partner's not attacking us or coming
Right.
at us. They're
Right.
trying to share something that's happening inside of them.
Right.
And we have the opportunity to get curious, which
Yes.
changes the conflict cycle already, because when there's curiosity and desire to understand where someone's coming from, then you're not coming into that situation just trying to, avoid a fight or stop somebody from thinking bad things about you, or,
Right.
we're both in our personal
Exactly.
spaces usually in conflict cycles.
Yes. And, I would say, I mean, for those of you who are in a relationship that you think is going to, a closer, commitment or marriage or whatever that looks like, do the work now. Go to some therapy and figure out, what do we do every time we get into conflict, because it's going to, I always say, it's either going to go away or it's going to get bigger. And if you don't figure those parts out, I mean, I love that this writer that he sent in this had been married 11 years. It's never too late. So whether you're at the beginning of a relationship or you're deep in it, it's never too late. I read something interesting about, how we say, like, when you have a baby, it doesn't come with a manual. When you get married, it doesn't come with a manual. Well, I thought this is a little interesting thing. The manual is each of your pasts and how you have had, if there is trauma in your past, which, pretty high percentage that there's something, whether it was, chronic trauma, whatever it looks like, you're
Even if
going
it's not
to
trauma, it's definitely been, you've gone through difficult things that have shaped you.
Yeah, yep, absolutely. So, attachment wounds, when we talk about that, it just essentially means, like, when the people that we depended on for safety, comfort, connection, all that, consistent availability, when they're not there for us, they're emotionally not there for us. So kids don't just remember what happened to them. The hardest thing that we see over and over here is they remember what they learned about themselves and about relationships because of what happened to them.
Which is why it makes sense in a conflict cycle that we'll start to argue and defend, because we learned something about ourselves when our partner brings something too. It's triggering what we've learned about ourselves.
Right. And so the lessons become our beliefs. And so it's like, I'm too much. I'm not enough. People leave. I can't trust anyone, or love has to be earned. Oh, or if
I'm failing, I can't get it right. No matter what I do, it doesn't work.
Yes, we kind of talked about that in another one, where if you have a deep negative core belief about yourself that I'm never good enough, I can't do anything right, and your spouse says, why did you put the ketchup back in that place?
That's right.
Like, boom, we might have a huge response.
We're not arguing about ketchup at all.
Yeah, we're not. Yeah, I just felt like I wasn't good enough for you, and that's not normally what our partner is intending for us to feel. So, the beliefs, they show up in adult relationships. It's not because we choose them consciously. It's our nervous system is trying to protect us from experiencing that same pain again.
It's so true. And we got to be gentle with that part of ourselves.
Yes.
It is and this is the thing. We plan more for vacations than we do for conflict.
Oh gosh.
We spend more time in relationship with our partners in the everyday life, which means conflict will come up. We've got calendars with all the events happening in the week, and we have that all laid out and planned. But when it comes to, hey, what do you need in conflict? What do you need when there's struggle? What do you need when there's challenge?
Right.
We don't have these conversations. We just expect each other to know without a blueprint. But how would we know what we need at the grocery store? How do we know where the kids need to be? How do we know anything?
Oh my gosh.
Because we plan for it.
Right. I just listened to a really good podcast from Esther Perel, who is my absolute favorite. I love her so much. And she talked about, if we all put even like a 10% effort into the marriage that we put into work and into parenting, into fun, into play, like vacations, all of that, if we put that small percentage back into our marriage, how much better our marriage would be. Oh my gosh.
Especially if we saw things like conflict as opportunities for connection, as opposed to seeing conflict as opportunities for disconnection and something to avoid and fear, which, like they say, it's like, if it gets too big, we just avoid each other. We stonewall, we go quiet until it's over. And then we haven't really resolved anything. Well, no wonder you'd really struggle to figure out, like, what do we do different?
Yeah. And oftentimes when we don't know how to, it's not always about the conflict. It's more about the inability to repair. That's what it is, right?
Exactly.
And so I always do with couples a really deep assessment, and we talk about, what is you use the word blueprint, Kat. What's your blueprint that you learned about conflict growing up? How did you know how did you know your mom was angry? How did you know your dad was angry? I mean, it's almost every time I'll get one that says, maybe the wife might say, oh my gosh, there was so much yelling and screaming in our home. And, there was fighting all the time. And then the husband might say, I never saw conflict at all in my house. And so we bring that right along with us too, right? Some of that learned behavior comes right into the picture. So something I want to kind of dive into is, he says he feels attacked. And so I don't have a ton of information on that, but he also said that he immediately goes into defending himself, right? Because that's not what I meant. That's not what I said.
Because
and then
she's saying I don't feel cared for. He's
Right.
like, wait a minute,
Yeah,
don't put that on me,
yes, but you know
which
what?
isn't what she's trying to
Yeah,
do.
because she's not saying I don't feel cared for. She's probably, he said I feel attacked, so I'm guessing maybe yelling, screaming, whatever it is. I mean, that's what's going on.
He feels attacked though because she said,
Oh yeah.
I feel like you don't care about me.
Yeah. She says after, I feel like I don't care about you. So here's what happens with couples like you. I always ask couples, what meaning do you make of that? So I would ask her because, she said, I don't feel like he cares about me.
Yeah.
That's not usually the first thing that comes out. Well, that is usually, actually, I take that back. That's the first thing that usually comes out. I feel like he doesn't care about me. And then he's sitting over there going,
I care about you so much. I love you.
Yes, you're the one I care and love about the most. But, this can go back to attachment wounds. I mean, her wound, maybe her attachment longing is to know that I am loved. I'm important.
And maybe this is where it's like slowing down conflict helps a lot, because when you get curious, it's like, what do you mean? Can you tell me more about that? Like understanding what care is, because, when people say, I feel like you're not listening to me, it's like, I'm right here.
Right.
What do you mean by that? So understanding what feeling cared about looks like to your partner helps you be like, this is coming from somewhere else. I need to understand her language of communication of what care is, because somewhere I unintentionally missed the mark, not because something's wrong with you, but because you can't really see something invisible. She's giving you something visible by saying, you don't care about me. And you're thinking of all the ways you care about her, but that's not translating because she's got something invisible that we need to get curious about that comes from her history of where she didn't feel cared about. And this was re-triggered on accident, like pushing a bruise you couldn't see.
Yeah. Oh, that's a perfect. Yeah. I think every fight has two conversations. The first is about the surface stuff, right? We're fighting about the money or the dishes. Oh my gosh. I hear about the dishes at least a couple times a week. Chores, sex, parents, in-laws, whatever it is. That's the first conversation. But the second is about attachment. What's underneath that withdrawing? What's underneath that attacking is, do I matter? Can I count on you? Will you choose me? Am I enough? Are we okay? When couples learn to answer that second question, the first one often becomes so much easier to resolve. We don't even go to that. But most couples do think that they're fighting about the dishes or financing, but they're fighting about something so much deeper, and that's the attachment longings. Do I matter? Can I trust when life gets hard that you're still going to be here for me? Those are attachment fears, and they drive almost every conflict in intimate relationships. So if you look at like what are some types of attachment wounds, I mean, just like that, you might have grown up feeling like I never felt like I mattered to my parents. I never felt like I could do good enough for my dad every time we worked together. Those are going to come up in those conversations, even if your spouse is, we're hoping that your spouse is never intentionally poking. I always say assume positive intent. But what happens is, if your spouse doesn't know, and these are why we dig deep into therapy, what your attachment longing is, or even what your trauma is, it's going to keep showing up, and they're going to be so confused, and they're probably going to even withdraw even more, or pursue. I call it pursue, or he says attack even more. Yeah.
And if it's really heavy and you do notice like, hey, we had all these conversations about planning differently, or I went into this thinking it was going to go differently, but yet the volume is coming up, the intensity is rising. Like, it is totally okay to take breaks too, because we got to slow down the energy that's happening to be able to come back to a place of like, if conflict is going to look like connection, we're not going to be able to do that if we just notice it's becoming more and more disconnection. So we need to just breathe,
take time out,
take time.
Yep. We've take a time out, and
always have a plan for when to come back together.
Yes. If you've got an anxious attachment, which there's usually one in a relationship, and one just walks away from the argument, that could blow up their entire system of, even though, maybe you've been married for 11 years, the relationship is good. That little wounded child in there might be thinking, he's never coming back to me.
And just to recap, anxious attachment is usually, I want to fix this now. I don't like abandonment. Abandonment means we need to fix right in the moment and go through it all. Where avoidant attachment says, this is getting too intense. I'm totally overwhelmed. I'm totally flooded. In order to make sure that I don't hurt my partner, I need to take space. I need to get back to baseline so that we can come back together. So,
right. Yeah.
Well, and yeah, the goal would be making sure that you come back together, because sometimes avoidant attachment means I don't ever want to do the conflict again, which is why it goes into stonewalling until it's over.
Yeah. And he says, they go sometimes hours or even days without. Gosh, I am so from Minnesota. I just gave that away, guys. I said days. Sorry. If you're a Minnesotan out there, woofda. Jeez, go Minnesota. Sorry, I just had to throw that in there. But yeah, he talks about that fear of how lonely and desperate he feels when she doesn't want to talk about it for days. That's a really hard time. So that's part of your repair cycle. It's not a healthy one, but if you look at their repair cycle is either we don't talk about it at all, or one of us just gives in and apologizes. But apology, or we blow up. I mean, apologies are great. What happens is if you don't make the change in behavior that continues to hurt your partner, that's not a repair. Okay. The repair comes when you apologize genuinely and then you quit doing that. And it takes your partner, it takes their nervous system many times of seeing trustworthy behavior that you're not going to do that every single time before they'll really start to trust a different response in you.
And this is why it takes, honestly, a lot of maturity, because when our partner brings something to us that says this hurt, they are not saying you hurt, you are the problem, you are bad. They are saying, I don't prefer this behavior because it's triggering to me. So by making the adjustment, they're not shaming you as a person. They're just saying this behavior doesn't work for me. And if there's a shame wound there, it's going to be really hard to apologize, because you're going to feel like you're saying, I'm bad, I'm wrong. No, just this behavior doesn't work. It's just, it's not. Making sure we don't take it too deep and we work on that part of ourselves that says I'm the problem. Because if there's shame there, you are going to struggle to be able to actively say I'm sorry and change, because you're trying to avoid shame. Understanding that our partners are looking for connection, usually assuming best intent about that. So if there's something that we can do, it's as simple as changing our shoes. It's not, I'm a terrible dresser. Like, it's not the same thing. So.
I think, and we've maybe mentioned this before, you guys are learning some of our terms here. The shame, we call that like the one down. And what happens is if you bring pain to your partner that they've caused, if they go into that shame of, oh, you know what, I'm just a bad husband, I guess I'm always the bad guy. What happens is it shifts the dynamic, because that shuts down and you're no longer talking about the pain that they caused. You're feeling bad for them because now they feel like they're a bad husband or a bad partner. And it just shifts the dynamic and the outcome of that entire conversation, and it does not lead to repair. So
it's actually pretty hopeless if you think about it, because no matter what your partner does, they're not going to be able to fix that shame wound in one conversation, which means the shame wound isn't fixed and the original incident isn't fixed. And so you can walk away in what I've used before of the concept of like two different pain buckets, and nobody's actually being able to pour into each other or being able to pour into anything that allows them to decrease the amount that's heavy and that they're holding.
So I guess when I work with the lens of emotionally focused therapy, EFT, which is a Susan Johnson modality, and I love Susan Johnson. I was trained by her, and I'll give you kind of the framework. So when couples come in, oftentimes I'll see, just like this guy that wrote in, there's one that is more of what we call a pursuer, who wants to talk about it. They want to get it off the table. They want it to be over with. And then we'll see a withdrawer who says, this is so uncomfortable. I don't want anything to do with this. Well, underneath what the withdrawer sees as attacking, he has this sense of, I don't think I can do anything right. I'm not good enough for her. And for her, what she sees as withdrawing is, I don't think he cares about me. I don't think he's going to be here for me. And then we connect, why are we doing that? Oftentimes our responses were protective for us growing up, but they're not working as adults in our intimate relationships. So we kind of dig deep and look at, what are these negative core beliefs that I have that keep showing up that you're unintentionally poking at? And we work through those. So, if that's you out there, I'm guessing all of you are probably saying, oh, that's me, or, oh, I do that every time. Go back and figure out, where is this response coming from? Because it's normally, it could be learned in that intimate relationship, but typically it's something from the past that just keeps coming up.
And this is where I love that you have the ball. I had another therapist friend that I knew one time who actually had a piece of flooring, and she'd be like, who has the floor? And then lay hand over the floor. Because the concept of that is, each person has something that's coming up. And instead of fighting about what's coming up in the other person or defending, it's like, wait, this is coming from somewhere. That's where conflict becomes connective, because you
Right.
can see,
Yes.
oh my gosh, this is what you're hearing, what you're experiencing, what you're
Right.
feeling, which changes the whole perspective
Right.
around what's happening in the moment. And this is what I'm thinking and
Exactly.
feeling. And now that's the part about therapy that can be really tough when you're working with couples, because you can see the whole cycle and be
yes.
like, there's so much love here,
Yes.
and yet they just can't hear each other.
Right.
And trying to bring them to a place where they hear each other is
Right.
really where the magic of connection
That's
through conflict happens.
Yeah, it sure does. When you can begin to see your partner's manual, like their operational guide of, wow, he's responding like this because of all of that hurt that he went through as a kiddo that he hasn't healed, you start to look at him differently. You have more compassion, and her as well. She never was, she grew up without a voice. She never was heard, and she was constantly fighting to be important and to be seen. No wonder she's yelling at me and I feel like I'm attacked.
And no wonder she feels not cared about.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So there's so much packed into this, guys. And this is just a little, tidbit, a little bite snack size of what we're responding to today. So we're hoping that you got some good stuff out of today. I'm sure you'll hear more about this in upcoming podcasts. And hey, guys, remember too, our podcast runs on questions from all of you. So if you have a therapy related question, or today's episode had brought something up in you, go to thekitchenshrink.com, hit Ask Kat and Kel, and leave us a question. We'd love to hear from you.
They are anonymous, so you don't have to
Yes,
worry about that.
that's
You can just leave a
right.
question.
That's
Free
right.
therapy for a little bit.
That's
Might
right.
as well.
Even if I know, I'm like, I think that's one of my friends, I'll never call you out. All right, guys. Well, thanks for being with us today. And remember, healing doesn't happen all at once. It happens one conversation at a time. We'll see you next week. Thanks for being here at The Kitchen Shrink. We're really glad you showed up today. Be kind to yourself and stay connected. We're Kat and Kel, and we're here for you. Real talk, real tools, real life.